And secret hint to everybody who's still here at this late date. Oh, thank you very much. Who's here in this late date or late hour? I don't change the content for the training that I do here for the conferences where I do it for 4x the price. It is the exact same training. This is a deal. For mine or any of the, it really is a great deal. Not just like this. This is a great group. So I was gonna say I think it is, I can't speak for them, but I would bet it is the same. Nothing else, to be really blunt, it's a pain in the expletive to make a training deck. Okay, now I can really get started. Okay, so I'm going to talk about AI, AppSec, and you. Actually, somewhat about me, in that I've been playing around with this stuff. Like he said, I work for DefectDojo Inc. I'm one of the CTO and one of the co-founders. And we've been playing around with AI, and I'm just techno-curious, so I've been playing around with AI. And these are the kind of things that I've learned and thought about, and I thought would be useful for everybody here. So, going to do a quick intro. I'm going to talk about AI powered by MCP. I want to talk about this thing I kind of made up that is now official because it's on a slide called LLM agility. I'm going to talk about some technology around LLMs that's just useful to know and some like pitfalls you can fall into, aka the lethal trifecta. And then I'll wrap up and have a conclusion. So, intro. So this is me. As my intro said, I'm at Tesauro. I like to call myself a reformed programmer, an AppSec engineer. I already said I was a CTO. I've been around OWASP forever and a day. Just so you know my biases, I have 25 plus years of using Linux and free open source software. That's a Linux laptop. The last time I ever ran a commercial OS by choice was Windows, and it was Windows 2000. So don't ask me to help you with your Windows machine. I can blissfully say I don't have a frickin' clue. And I'm a current Golang fanboy. When I get to write code, which is not frequently enough, I write it in Go. And yes, I got this body up in the air long enough to break 2 boards at once when I got my 2nd degree black belt. That was crazy, and that scared me. That was in late May, and I started practicing in September. So I was quite afraid of that, but I lived through it, which is cool. Okay, so AI influence. Well, if nothing else, it certainly influenced the agenda if you looked at it on this conference. There may or may not have been the use of the word in A and I. Maybe if we had a typewriter, those keys would have broke. But what is it going to be, right? If you talk to people, what is it going to be? Oops, come here, you. Is it that like earth-shattering existential event that's going to crush us all under the power of the AI gods, and we're just going to be these little plebeians running around under AI, and it'll do all the things? Or maybe it's a utopia, but it'll certainly change everything. Is that what we're going to have? Or is it going to be one of those events that, like, you're looking at your phone and you miss it? Like, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I've done some cool stuff with AI, and I've seen some serious clangers with AI to just make me facepalm. So I'm not sure if we know this yet. So we're somewhere between those 2 diagrams, or pictures. And by the way, I'm preempting something later in the deck. All of these are AI generated, except for the screenshots. I took screenshots for those, go figure. I don't need an AI to take a screenshot for me. Not yet. So this, I think, is how we think of AI, right? You say, like, let's say you could prompt in this theoretical new universe where AI can do physical things, and I want a truck, right? What's in your head, right? What do you want AI to produce? Probably something like this, right? I want a bad A truck, right? When I say prompt, I want a truck. And you kind of, when you do prompt stuff, you kind of expect AI to do this, bad A stuff that really surprises you. Unfortunately, I think a lot of times when you say prompt, I want a truck, what you get is this, right? Like, that's a truck. It's not like a truck I'm going to brag about, but it's a frickin' truck. And so I think reality also lies between those 2, right? I love this. This is the Andre, I don't know, Kaparthi. Some people are better at pronouncing names than me. AI co-founder. Did this new thing called NanoChat, right? He left AI and now he's got his own thing. He was asked, did you vibe code that? It was like, oh God, no. No, I had to handwrite that. There's no way I could vibe code that. Well, these are the people that are telling us to vibe code this stuff, and they're like, well, It's good enough for you, not for my stuff. My stuff's special, right? So that was just interesting. That popped in the news, and I had to include that. And then this is something that's interesting about vibe coding. This is some code I wrote. Okay, this is for an internal tool we used at DefectDojo Inc. I was checking some conditionals on some versioning, and I didn't think I could ever get there, right? If you can't read it in the back, it says, we should never get here, but just in case, log a message that said unknown problem during upgrade checks and exit with a 1. I actually got that message one time. I found I got to the code that I didn't think I would ever get to. And would vibe code put that in there? I kind of don't think so. Maybe not though. So that was just interesting. This is one of the things where I tell people you don't want to hire me as a developer because I think like, wow, I shouldn't get here, but I might get here, so I'm going to write some code to check it. Right? Most people would just move on. I don't know, I'm anal retentive in that regard. But this is something like, would vibe code ever produce that line? I kind of don't think so. Maybe later, if it gets better. And then, what is the cost of this speed that we're getting with AI? Are we trading like quick results for mediocrity? Because I mean, if you looked at Jim Manico's talk, where he did some like naively prompted code, he got FF minuses, Ds, I can't remember the grades he gave them, but none of it was great. And so yes, I can produce code, but like code at D quality, I'm not too excited by that. So I'm a Shakespeare person, I like Shakespeare. When I was doing this talk, this one bit that sticks in my head a lot from King Lear, truth a dog must to kennel, he must be whipped out, then Lady Brack may stand by the fire and stink. But the gist of this is the fool talking to King Lear, and he's saying, you don't want to hear the truth, right? So in my mind, I thought, if truth's a dog, what's AI, right? What kind of dog is AI? I think it's kind of like a dog who desperately wants the prompt treat, right? But this is AI, right? So it can't be a nice, friendly-looking golden. It has to be like a cyber dog. So I think that's what AI is. It's a cyber dog. So let's talk about AI powered by MCP, because actually this is, I think, a pretty cool thing. And we've heard several people talk about this on this and various other stages about MCP. And I actually think MCP is pretty cool. Because like one of the problems of making AI better is to feed it the right kind of data so it has the right kind of context so it can do the right kind of thing. And even though it has a whole bloody internet in its head, that's a lot to sift through if nothing else. You want it to focus on something. So just to level set, this is how MCP servers work, right? I have an MCP server. I have some kind of endpoints, usually API endpoints, but it could be a file system or whatever. And then it pulls data in. And so the whole idea of an MCP is, I want to get additional data that's not in the God, I almost said brain, but it's really not a brain, in the data store of the LLM, right? And so how do I get that easily? Let's make a common protocol, MCP, to pull that stuff in. So this is a way to say, hey, grab this thing that you don't know about and add it to your reasoning while you're thinking through a problem I asked you about. So let's talk about that with vulnerability management and running a bunch of security tools. That, we should be able to just funnel all this stuff into your LLM and let the LLM make sense of it. But the problem is, and I know this because I've been doing DefectDojo for 11 years, every one of those tools has a different view of the universe about what a vulnerability is. So now I'm asking the LLM to make sense of every sort of snowflakey way that all of those vendors want to do things. And even if I get smart and I slap an LLM, or an MCP rather, on top of all of them, that just makes it easier to get the disparate data sources into the thing. So I don't know that I've really improved things. I just made it easier to get data that's hard for the LLM to understand into the LLM. So better, but not by much. And so one of the things we did with DefectDojo is we wrote 3 actually, because the frickin' standard changed while we were writing these things. But the third one I actually wrote myself. Some other people wrote the first 2. But when we did that, we realized, wait a minute, one of the things that's really interesting is garbage in, garbage out. And the whole job, honestly, of DefectDojo is to normalize and make sense of and dedupe, false positive, yada, yada, all your different scanner data. Well, then we already have a really clean source of data in DefectDojo. And then suddenly that I got to understand 15 different snowflakes because I have 15 different tools falls down to, I just have to understand what DefectDojo thinks a finding is, right? And then the rest is easy. So suddenly you take the problem, and it turns into this, right? All of those tools go to Dojo. Dojo makes them into one representation of a finding, and then LLMs can make a lot better use of that data. And this honestly surprised me. We did this, to be really blunt, because a lot of customers said, we want LLM stuff in your DefectDojo. And we're like, okay, fine. Put your peanut butter in my chocolate. Let's see where this goes. And I, grudgingly kind of said, we'll do this thing. But it actually worked shockingly well. I was surprised at how interesting. You could do things like, and this I'm speaking a little bit of DefectDojo speak here, so I apologize. But which of my products is the most risky looking at exploitability? Because one of the things we do is we can augment with EPSS and KEV data, right? And so I can take that and actually say, well, there's more criticals in product A, but product B has more exploitable things, even though they're only highs. So actually, you should pay attention to B. And it gave us answers like that. And I was honestly surprised, pleasantly surprised, because I was somewhat skeptical, but it actually worked. So this stuff can be really real. But I think one of the things that people lose is this idea of the quality of the data going in. You can't just throw a bunch of stuff at an LLM in hopes it pukes out good stuff. You got to think about that data. And in the case of that I experienced, which was that at MCP, suddenly I'm getting really clean data in and getting great results back because the LLM isn't having to burn a lot of cycles trying to understand, well, Checkmarks thinks this is what a finding looks like, and Sneak has a different representation, and Tenable has this whole nother weird thing that goes away. There was another point I wanted to make here, and I'm losing it. Oh, that was the other thing that was interesting about this, about writing the MCP in particular, and this is something I think I'd say later, so maybe I'm diming out my own slides, but the other interesting thing is the data that you're sending to it, you pay for that data. It's eaten tokens, right? So think about if you are creating an MCP server, do I really need to send them a date? For example, the framework we use to create DefectDojo has a created and modified date that just is automatically created because of the framework. There's also a date that finding occurred. I have 3 dates. Do I need to send all 3 dates to the LLM? Well, not really. There's only the date that finding was run that LLM should care about in terms of reporting or SLA or whatever. So just don't send those dates. Our MCP server doesn't, because why? I just gave muddy data to an LLM. That doesn't help anybody. Which brings me to the next point, which is our new currency, right? Is tokens. And I don't mean that crypto crap. I mean LLM tokens. Because that is really what people are thinking about. And it actually makes me wonder, is there a new job title called PTO? And I don't mean paid time off. I mean, yes, prompt token optimization, right? Not SEO, it's prompt token optimization. Because honestly, that stuff is expensive. Right now, we're in the blissful period of them wanting to grow, the LLM makers wanting to grow, and tokens are relatively cheap. But guess what happens if there's 1 or 2 winners? The prices will go up, right? This is not a model economically that's going to sustain at the price levels we have today. I don't think even close. What if OpenAI went belly up, right? What if AI go boom? What would you do? Well, things would certainly change, but it's gotten kind of crazy. I mean, I don't think this is news to anybody in this room, but the deals are insanely big. There's tons of market power and influence. We're dealing with Silicon Valley that does the fake it till you make it thing. There's a lot of blast radius effects. The big guys who are doing LLM stuff or AI stuff, whatever you want to call it, they have a lot of people that actually live off of them. Second order effects how many companies would poof out of existence if OpenAI went brrr and turned off their network? Right? How many companies are just like, we integrate with OpenAI? We don't do anything, right? That's kind of spooky to me. And for some of these players, OpenAI has Microsoft with them, so I don't think they're going to be allowed to die. Gemini shouldn't die because it has Google attached with it, and Google has alternate revenue streams. But Mistral and Anthropic, if things get really lean in the AI market, what's going to happen to those people? I mean, I think Claude is pretty amazing, but what's their alternate revenue stream if the revenue stream dries up for Claude? Like, I'm not sure how anybody knows what that is. Oh, yes. The murky economics of data center investments. These are where the numbers are insane. 5.2 trillion worldwide to put up data centers to house all this AI thinking. But the thing is, if you kind of play the numbers, they're building more data centers than the revenue growth projects they should need. They're gambling on a series of increasing growth over time. Sorry, my undergrad was in economics, so I jive on this stuff. But it's just kind of spooky. Like, they have to make a lot of sales and have a lot of growth to make that 5.2 trillion in data centers pay off. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of cricket-filled data centers in the middle of nowhere that have cheap power that go idle. Right? And suddenly, like, getting a data center is going to be like, I don't know, tripping over something on the way to your car. And the other thing that's interesting is with all this money sloshing around, the debt that finances these things is getting murkier and murkier. Like, they're not your normal debt markets. I'll talk more about that later, but it just makes it harder to understand and quantify the risk that these people from an economic perspective portray. And then the credit of the key players, if you're not Microsoft, who has tons of money, or OpenAI, it gets interesting to think about. Like, what happens, like I said, if the money dries up and that debt goes poof? This is a happy part of my talk. So let's talk about what I did learn from doing that MCP server. Like I said this earlier, think about tokens, because for me, I'm thinking about tokens for my customers, but honestly, if you're using an MCP for you, you're paying for those tokens, so you have all sorts of reasons to just not send superfluous, unused data off to LLMs because you pay for it. Although, you know, OpenAI and the other people would love you to get on the pro plan. Think about what you want that LLM to do, but even more importantly, think about what you don't want that LLM to do. When we launched MCP, it's read-only. It doesn't have any ability to change anything in DefectDojo. It's really a reporting engine right now, which is fine, because guess what? The problem that it could cause is somebody could misread something they shouldn't read, as opposed to somebody can accidentally delete all their finding data. Like that one, I forget that one AI company that they were doing like automation of their deployment, and their AI corrected their deployment by deleting everything in AWS. Oops, right? Think about those things. Oh, yes. And then think about how much context is needed by the LLM to make sense of the data you're sending it. If you're sending it a lot of data that it can't make sense of, you're really not moving the needle much at all, right? The LLM is going to have to guess. This is where, in LLMs in particular, MCPs rather in particular, tools, which are the things LLMs can call, can have descriptions, which end up being instructions to the LLM. Think about those. One thing we noticed, this was just random, one of the very common things, how many criticals do I have? How many highs do I have, right? These are normal kind of queries that came into DefectDojo. Well, there's a count in the metadata of every API request. However, we initially sent, I think I don't remember what it was, I think it was 100 findings was the default, right? So you were requesting 100 findings back to find out there were 200 criticals. So I'm sending you 200 findings or 100 findings worth of data to get one integer, right? Not particularly efficient. So in the description, we told the LLMs, by the way, there's this thing called limit, and you can do limit 1 and get a count. And guess what? We just reduced traffic on us. We made the LLM answer much quicker, or the MCP rather answer much quicker. So there's little things like that you really have to keep in your head when you're thinking these things through. It was standard I/O, SSE, HTTP streaming, the next flavor of network that they pick tomorrow. You have to decide what you want to do. I like the HTTP ones. I think those are better, honestly. But standard I/O is pretty popular for the local coding agents, but just something you have to consider. And then read the spec. I know this is frickin' boring, but read the spec. I watched so many silly videos and read these what is MCP things in the early days, and they were crap. They were all just recycled AI-generated summarization crap. And then I finally just read the bloody spec. And guess what? Then I knew how it was supposed to work. So I would highly recommend, although do it with some caffeine, read the spec. Oh, and then this thing, if you haven't seen MCP Inspector, this is a freaking cool tool. This is a great way to interrogate any MCP server to see what it offers, right? It'll give you prompts, it will give you resources, it'll give you tools, you can list them. You're sort of pretending to be a client of that MCP server with this website. It's like a locally running web app. I put it in a container, but if you know me, that's no surprise. You can do things like, this is listing the tools that we have for DefectDojo. So get engagements, get finding by ID, get findings, get Dojo group members, whatever, right? Those are the tools. Then it'll also list things like prompts. So we have a couple of canned prompts that we'll send to people to give them an idea of like, these are things you can pull out of Dojo, right? But this is a suite. If you don't know about this, this is a great find. And then I don't really have time to talk through this, but if you want to know more about the lessons we learned doing an MCP, Tracy, one of the people who works at DefectDojo Inc., did these 2 videos. Yes, they're very DefectDojo-centric. I mean, go figure, we made them. But they actually do have some interesting points beyond just the DefectDojo implementation. So if you want some more information, these are useful videos to go watch. So what can an MCP do for you, right? Let's answer that question. Well, perhaps one of the things it could do for you is you got to tell somebody something, so you write some bullet points. And you ask your LLM through an MCP to turn those bullet points into an email, which it does. And you send the email to your coworker who goes, God, I don't want to read that, and sends it with his MCP to a thing to make bullet points out of your email, and then you read the bullet points. Right? That's kind of interesting circular problem there. Like, I want to look like I'm productive, but I don't want to just send bullet points. But the person doesn't want to read it. So I just love AI. It's great. So let's talk about LLM agility. I think this is actually an important thing. And we kind of heard some of it a little bit from James a bit ago. But LLM agility. So if you've been around in the AppSec world, you may or may not have heard of this thing called cryptographic agility. And the whole idea there is, hey, there might be a problem with your crypto algorithm in the future, and if it's easy for you to swap it, then you won't get a fun Friday randomly showing up in your life, right? This is a good idea. Or even if there's just a better or more efficient, doesn't really have to necessarily be for a security incident, but this is a way to be able to swap those out easily, because over time things change. Like, we're not using RC4 anymore, and I can remember when the guidance was, you should MD5 your passwords. That used to be the guidance, because it was better than clear text, which was the thing before that. So these things change, and I like this about cryptographic agility. So if you take basically this Wikipedia thing, and you just put LLM in the place of where it says crypto, you kind of have LLM agility. I think you want to think about being able to switch those out, right? Maybe today, Claude is the man, the most coolest LLM ever, and it'll solve all your problems. But then tomorrow, Gemini is going to come out with the new cool thing, and then Mistral will be even better. And if you don't have that agility, you're tied to the growth of functionality of that vendor, right? But if you don't have that hard-coded in, suddenly when somebody gets better, you just switch, right? Why not? So I really think LLM agility is an important thing, because when Jimi A.I. Hendrix sang Castles Made of Sand, he was really talking about your AI vendor of choice not changing not surviving the changing tides, right? I don't know why that was in my head. That was easy that's generated with one prompt too. I was kind of pleasantly surprised it didn't look like heck. The other thing about LLM agility that's important to consider is, do you want your company tied to this AI vendor? Right? This particular AI vendor had a chat bot. This poor individual, another really happy part of my afternoon talk. Unfortunately, this kid got really wrapped around the axle with AI chatting and ended up committing suicide. Because of the terms of service, they were forced into arbitration, and the total payout, $100. That's not nice. And that's me being very diplomatic. Yeah, I would use other words, but I'm being recorded. So I don't know that I want my company tied to any particular AI company because this stuff happens. Because there's a lot of unknowns around AI. The other interesting thing is this crazy circular financing, right? You have OpenAI giving money to NVIDIA giving money to OpenAI, who's going to build data centers and put NVIDIA chips in them. And the company that's going to build those data centers is mostly owned by OpenAI. No, excuse me, by NVIDIA. Sorry, circular, right? So, like, honestly, true fact, I got a job offer from Enron back in the day. I didn't take it. But man, did that come flashing back to me when I started reading these things. Like, it is kind of interesting. And this is making it in the press now outside of, like, economic stuff. And I had to write this down because I wanted to get this accurately. NVIDIA is investing billions in selling chips to OpenAI, who is buying chips and earning stock in AMD. AMD sells processors to Oracle, which is building data centers with OpenAI, which also gets the data center work from CodeWeave, and that company is partially owned by NVIDIA. Wow. That's some clever, interesting financing. Although that one took about 6 iterations to get people passing IOUs together, and actually all of them having mostly 2 arms. Mostly 2 arms. Okay, let's talk about Ollama, LangChain, LangGraph, LangFlow, and most importantly, the lethal trifecta. So just to level set everybody, Ollama is a way to run mostly LLMs locally, but they can be remote. And it's a great way to give you that LLM agility. I've been playing around with this. It's really fantastic. It's sweet to just be able to go, I don't want to use this one, I want to use that one, and it just works. Beautiful. So if you don't know about it, that's something you definitely should. LangChain was the first kind of very big library that made interacting with LLMs easy. LangGraph was built on top of LangChain, and it allowed you to do more stateful agenty kind of things. And LangFlow was yet another layer on making it even easier to do these like multi-step things with LLMs. So these are the big kind of, if you're building stuff with LLMs, you probably are playing with a subset of these to do your development work. There are multiple languages. I use them because there's a Go client, but they have Python and TypeScript and all those others too. And then I don't have time to talk about this, but I couldn't not put this in the presentation. If you haven't played with Fabric or PAI, this personal AI, Daniel Messler, go look that guy up and watch his stuff. He's amazing. I got to meet him in Bern, Switzerland last year. Super bright guy. Fabric is an amazing tool. And if you want to have a good example of like a cool thing you can do with LLMs that's really pragmatic, that is it. And his personal AI infrastructure has insanely good ideas that this guy's giving away for free. Please go look at those. They are super, super cool. And I'm not getting paid to say that, although I like the guy. So one of the things you need to think about when you're looking at these agentic AI multi-step things is a compounding error problem, right? No AI is 100%. I don't think anyone will fight me on that. But let's just pretend every AI is running at 95% accuracy. If you have 5 steps in your process, you've plummeted down to 77% accuracy. And then if you have 20 steps, you're down to 36% accuracy because those 5% keep compounding over time. So you get these really interesting things where I want to glue together all these AIs and have them just continually run forward, but they get less accurate every step. There's a really cool DARPA challenge. Don't remember what it was called, but I saw an interview with the Trail of Bits, who came in 3rd. I forget the fellow at Trail of Bits. A big security company, does some kind of high-end security work. They participated in the challenge, and the challenge was write AI tooling that finds a vulnerability, writes an exploit for that vulnerability, fixes a vulnerability, then runs the exploit to prove that it's fixed. Right? That was the goal of this DARPA challenge. They came in 3rd, and they said in the first round, a ton of the companies got washed out because they just did this magic AI do all the things, And they just got so inaccurate towards the end of their multi-step process that they just couldn't work. What the Trail of Bits person said that was super insightful in the video I watched of his interview was they actually put deterministic, AKA like normal old programming stuff, between the steps, which basically reset that error rate every step. And that was how they were able to get the effectiveness. And they actually did, I mean, they had stuff that would find vulnerabilities, write an exploit for them, patch it, do the exploit again, and prove that it was fixed. It was pretty amazing, honestly, but not just a string of AI stuff. The other thing to think about when you're looking at AI is, this is a great article about the 70% problem, and anybody who's done vibe coding or done AI stuff probably knows about this. You can get like POC level stuff out really quick, but when you want to do stuff that's like production grade and you're happy with, you're not really there. Maybe it's not 70, maybe it's 80. I've asked Claude and Gemini CLI and those others to produce, everything's Go for me. I've gotten Go code that won't build. Like, that's kind of a low bar. That's not really hard. Like, stuff doesn't build. So this is one of your problems. Like, you can get this thing that looks pretty shiny and neat, but when you try to actually make it production worthy, it's that problem, right? The hardest part of any problem is the last 20%, and you've just left yourself the hardest part to do manually. So it's just something to consider when you're working with LLMs. And then I'm a little concerned about the race to the bottom, and I kind of hinted at this earlier, right? The idea of a race to the bottom was, who's this? Stephen Brandis? Yeah, Louis Brandis, the Supreme Court Justice. And this was the concept that as states were vying for other companies to move into their state, they would give them more and more incentives. And it was a race to sort of give away the most you could to any company to get them to come to your state to get jobs and yada, yada, economic improvement. And he coined the race to the bottom problem. And I'm a little worried that with everybody's, we got to put AI in everything. You know, you got just like everything is AI. That we are pushing towards less and less quality. And it's more about I can make output rather than I can make output that I care to interact with. And so it's just another thing to be concerned of. I think if you do the multi-step process with deterministic between the LLM steps, you can sort of fight this, but just be aware. Oh, and then AI work slop. So I love this, right? Like, you ask a question on Slack and somebody replies back with a very long post that's bullet pointed and has lots of emojis. Where did that come from? Oh wait, copy paste out of LLM output. Thank you, I could have asked that myself. I would prefer not to have a summary of what a GPT thing tells me. I'd rather have your brain thoughts, right? That drives me nuts. Personal just bias. But this is actually really a problem, right? I have all these things making transcripts and doing reports, and they all look shiny and neat, but when you actually look into them, they're not actually all that shiny and neat. So there's a lot of people that are spending time reviewing these things from AI to only find out that they're not really that great. And suddenly this efficiency gain isn't a gain. It's actually a net loss. And then who's going to win the AI slop? This is a super interesting article from The Economist that talked about how you handle, this AI slop world and the incentives around it. And there's really an incentive for chat or GPT or LLM manufacturers or vendors or whatever you want to call them to get that produced and out into the world. I mean, you tell that when you look at the internet now, it's kind of everywhere. But the interesting thing about this is that although they have an incentive to get it out there, it's actually driving up, it is driving up the desire for quality, like curated content, right? And because of that, and people's short attention spans, basically, those that produce quality content are getting, and you mix that with the social networking algorithms, that content is bubbling to the top, and suddenly it's a winner-take-all kind of environment where there'll be one or two content producers that produce quality content that bubble to the top, and the rest is slop. So that the middling people that are decent quality content creators are going to disappear because they're going to get buried in slop, basically. This is very interesting. Oh, the other aspect of this, wow, it broke this thing on my screen, but it didn't matter. The other aspect of this slop thing is that this is putting a great contention between those that have copyright for real content and those that want to do something with it. We're already seeing lawsuits. Reddit is suing one of the players, I forget which one, that came out recently. So now we're having this legal battle around who owns content, and I don't see slop going away. What I do see is some kind of mechanism to figure out how to fairly compensate like content creators for their like IP protected content. I have no idea what that's going to look like, but I think that's going to have to bubble out because I think, well, it's just interesting. I love the fact that like Disney will protect you from being able to produce like Daffy Duck, but if you say, I want a duck that looks human-like and is only wearing a shirt, right? Guess what the LLM's going to produce? It's going to produce Daffy Duck. So good luck with that, but that's something I think is going to get shook out somehow. I don't see how that doesn't not change. Okay, the lethal trifecta. So if you were doing LLM things, the three big things I would highly recommend you think about, well, are these: access to untrusted sources, the ability to read valuable secrets or just sensitive data, and the ability to communicate with the outside world. These are broad topics, but anytime you can take one of these off the table in your LLM design, you've made your thing significantly more robust in terms of security, right? So now you may not be able to take all three of these off, but if you have all three, you really, really, really need to think about security in your LLM-ified thing, whatever that is. I don't need to explain those, right? Yeah, those are all good. And MCPs kind of exacerbate that outside tool problem, by the way. Although I will say this about MCPs, and this doesn't apply to me in some regards because I've been dealing with APIs forever and I've just write code to do that, but I can write code to do that. It is really kind of empowering that now with MCPs, you can have people call APIs who just type a sentence. That's actually really like expanding the pool of data that people can use. I love that about MCPs, even though there are other problems. It's not a cost-free change. So prompt injection, like that's inherent. It is a feature, not a bug. Like the fact that you have a thing that takes in text and outputs text, and sometimes that text is code, and sometimes that text is not code. And by the way, I didn't differentiate between a prompt and the output because there isn't one. Like that's just a problem. No idea how we get around that. I mean, it's like if you've been in AppSec for a while, the code versus data problem is perpetual. And boy, did we do it in spades with LLMs, but it's just there. The other interesting thing in this article that I thought was really clever was typical security systems are deterministic, right? I run my SAST against your thing. I find 2 instances of SQL injection and a cross-site scripting. If I run it again, I find 2 instances of cross-site scripting and a SQL injection, or whatever I said, right? It repeats. It's deterministic. That's not true if you run it against an LLM. Like the first time it might get one thing, the second time it might get something else. So how do you validate the responses of your LLM when you're sort of QAing your LLM product? Like that they're kind of mostly right all the time-ish? Like that's like, talk to a QA person about how do you write a test for quite rightish most of the time, and their head will explode. Justifiably so. So I have no idea how you test this stuff. It's going to be super interesting, and I'm dealing with that personally at DefectDojo Inc. And then I think the biggest thing that I got out of this article was adopting what they called the civil engineering mindset. Right? Your traditional way of like wait for the bugs to bubble to the surface and then squash them, I don't think that works. Not with LLM stuff. Particularly because of deterministic and a whole bunch of other reasons. I think you just have to accept that LLMs have these fundamental design flaws. I mean, I don't know how you make prompts better. I love that like AIM prompts are problematic. So we're gonna have an LLM review the prompts before it goes to the real LLM to see if those prompts are bad. I'm like, so LLM bad, more LLM better? Okay, sure, whatever. But anyway, you just accept the thing is flawed and build some serious guardrails around it. I think that's how you do it. Like the civil engineering idea is you build a bridge for 4 cars is what the plan is. You make it work for 8, right? I just CYA the heck out of this thing because I'm afraid that it's going to fall down and bad things are going to happen. And that's the prioritized safety margins and bounded access, right? You do safety margins. You restrict external queries. That's why our MCP for DefectDojo is read-only. I'm happy to add some read-write capabilities in future when a customer asks for that, but I'm sure not going to launch it that way. And then you limit the blast radius. And then fail safely. Like, should be no surprise. Anything that reduces the risks of when those things go wrong, when they can go wrong, is going to make your life better. Woo! Okay, wrapping things up and hopefully not pushing the magic kill my laptop button. So, I love this. Snake 1 eating Snake 2's tail, right? All of these big LLM players are completely economically in bed with each other. And by the way, 8 iterations to get this. Here's some other ones. And here's oh shoot, I can't read my prompt because the screen is broken, or it's just showing me all white. Well, whatever. The prompt was, I want to show Snake 1 and label it NVIDIA eating the tail of Snake 2. Or excuse me, the first part of the prompt was, in a circle, I want to show Snake 1 eating the tail of Snake 2, while Snake 2 is eating the tail of Snake 1, label 1, NVIDIA, label 2, OpenAI. Do you see a circle up there, like a single circle? None of those are even circles. That was just crazy. I was like, how many iterations do you have to do to get this right? It's kind of nuts. I love this one. This came into my email the other day. I got it on the 15th. It said, your thing that you ordered is going to arrive on the 13th. It showed up on the 17th. And something you'll realize if you mess with LLMs kind of at a more low level, like particularly if you get the open source ones and run them locally, they have no idea what day it is. They don't know what day, they don't know what time. You literally have to tell them this, right? Which feels totally obvious. And if you use the ChatGPTs and Claudes, they already have tooling that does this for you so you don't see it. But when you start playing with kind of raw LLMs, you realize how much of a dress those ones that are commercial have on them. They are very well dressed. So if I say good enough for, what do you think? That's good enough for, thank you. That is good enough for government work, right? Well, what's the new version of that? That's good enough for AI output, right? That's what we're getting to. I think we're gonna have to settle here. I don't wanna settle, honestly, but I think we are settling currently. Hopefully the settling doesn't have to happen forever. And then, one redeeming thing, if this presentation has been a complete cluster foxtrot, I can claim that it was a deep fake, and I didn't really give it, right? That is my one redeeming factor. And this was me asking an AI to say, create an image of someone giving a presentation that really isn't that person. Instead, it's the AI. And that's what I got. That lady's like speaking magic sine waves to the dude on the screen, or whatever the heck that is. So just remember, this is a screenshot, whatever, from one of my favorite movies, Brazil. Listen, kid, we're all in this together. So go play around, learn some stuff about AIs, and then share. Like, I think that's how we really make this better. And I've heard that in several of the talks today. Play around with this stuff and share, right? Because we're all going to find interesting things. Like, top tip, if you quote the strings that you want to, of the words, you want to appear in image generators, at least for the Gemini one, it actually gets the words right. Who knew? But if you quote them and say, add the label, quote, NVIDIA, it doesn't make up words like NJB5 that is supposed to be NVIDIA. It actually puts the word NVIDIA in there. It's kind of crazy. So yes, work on this, and that's actually, I think, all I've got. Yes, and I'll happily take questions. Yeah, I've got, a couple of minutes. If people have questions, I'll happily answer them. If I can see them, yeah, I see what you see, James. This is like a little bit blinding. I think there's people out there. Yeah. Okay, we'll put this to bed. I don't have to be here any longer.
Matt, how does it feel to be an AI doomerism advocate here?
You know, it's funny. This happened to the talk I did. I was last con or 2 last cons ago, where I wanted to do this very positive talk, and it ended up being rather doomerish. But I actually do think this stuff is pretty cool, and I've seen some really cool results. I guess for me, in my heart of hearts, I really fight against the OMG, it's going to save the world, right? I don't think it's going to do that. I think it's going to be pretty dang cool. But then again, we were all going to do CI/CD and everything would work right, and we'd never have app problems. And we know where that went. So like, I just have a problem with the super hype. I think that's where you get me smacking people. Oh, behind you, Bankham.
Did you purposefully embed the false attribution of Daffy Duck to Disney when you meant Daffy Duck is Warner Brothers and Donald Duck is Disney? So is that your intentional check and make sure the AI output is valid?
If you want to believe I'm clever, I am happy to have you believe that. I mean, yes, it was intentional. Wink, wink. That's right. Which gorilla do I want to beat me up later, right? Whatever.
What's your wish list, AI wish list for DefectDojo?
Oh, interesting. AI wish list for DefectDojo. Oh, that's super interesting. So the things we've been playing with so far have been reporting. What would be really more interesting is to be able to do things like tying Dojo's data into external systems. Like, how do you say this? Like, well, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use dry run. Dry run security will find problems and know about problems and put them in your PRs, right? Which is pretty dang cool. Wouldn't it be cool if you could extend that to where DefectDojo could know there was a problem, it would create a finding, wait for the person to fix that PR, and then close that finding? That would be a way to show the teams that, hey, you fixed something that although it's in DefectDojo, it never really had to be here, right? I think that's really cool. Like, I think those kind of things where I can extend the ability of Dojo to show results of teams' efforts that tend to be quiet and hidden, I think that would be awesome. The other interesting thing that we played with that we honestly haven't had good luck with is like getting, like the inevitable problem is vendor A makes an output of JSON and it looks like this today and tomorrow it looks like that because, change. And then that breaks stuff. And it would be really interesting to see, and we haven't had good luck with this, honestly, if we could get something that just could figure out parsing. Like it does figure out an answer, it's just usually not the answer we want. So something like that would be pretty cool. The one thing we did with that, sneaky admission, this is in the pro version, but we have a universal parser, but in that case, a human is mapping attributes from a file to Dojo attributes. So like the AI is the person, but I can't get an AI to make that leap yet, at least not successfully. Thank you, great question. All right, well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.